This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Now it's time for Spiritual Learning with Priestess Lilly.
Welcome to my radio show. Priestess Lilly, Sacred Heart Healer, Space Holder, and Spiritual Life Coach. Hi, I'm Priestess Lilly. Welcome. This radio show podcast I have created to help assist humanity rise the consciousness through connection, holding space for thought-activating conversation with heart-centered leaders, wisdom keepers, and divine humans expanding into their authenticity and soul purpose. Today's guest, David, is a photographer, painter, singer, and lecturer who resides in the town of Kaiapoi, just north of Christchurch, New Zealand. Originally from London, David is predominantly known in New Zealand for his work and study of UFOs, a path that is opened to him over 35 years while serving in the New Zealand Navy. In this scenario, the ship he served on had a close encounter with a USO, an unidentified submerged object, out of the Pacific. An experience that left a profound effect on David and ultimately his direction in his life, which has been one of self-discovery, personal development, and research. For many years now, David has been researching into the city of Atlantis. He now regularly lectures on this subject, a lecture which is insightful and informative presentation explaining both scientifically and spiritually the history of the purpose of Atlantis, and has the webpage Atlantis is Rising. Welcome, David. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So what we get to next is what happened. Now, this is when it gets both fascinating and very challenging. Now, before I launch into this part, I just want to say to the listeners, when I speak and when I lecture, I'm coming from scientific information, evidences, scientifically, information that I have gained from scientists and mathematicians and philosophers globally. I have a lot of friends who are very well known in the scientific community. I have friends that are very well known in the UFO or UAP environment, people that are very well known who are on television, and you would have seen that I am acquainted with, and therefore an enormous amount of the information that I have been given comes from these people. So I'm bringing as much scientific evidences as possible so that it becomes more credible when I'm talking to people in my lectures, that I'm actually bringing as much fact as I possibly can, because of course people who do want to believe, and it is easy, by the way, and I would be not forgiven to be able to say, I stand up and just say Atlantis, blah, 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 wonderful, wonderful, believe, and everyone goes, oh, how wonderful, yes, we believe. Now, I can do that. And a lot of people in my experiences have done that.
Yeah.
And it makes them money, and they make a very good living from that, and people are very willing to hand over money to be told wonderful things. And God only knows we need to hear wonderful things right now in the world that we're living, which is a very scary place. But I can't do that. I want to be able to say to people, the information I'm going to share with you, are from my experiences, and I'm really happy to share my experiences with you, but they are mine, from over 35 years of research around the world. There are also my experiences that I've had myself, such as the Navy experience. That was me in the heart of that experience. So I'm saying categorically this is what happened. It also appeals to people because it is easy to meet people who say, I saw an object, I saw a light in the sky, and that's it. I want to bring more than just that. I want to bring evidences to that. So in the lectures, I showed slides, information through slideshows and so forth. So what I bring and what I'm going to talk about is both, it can both tantalize, excite, and scare the bejeebers. It's going to be so outlandish that it's going to take a little bit of time to think, is this guy actually saying what I think he said? But I think the majority of people who watch and listen to shows like yourself are people who already have the gift of the open mind.
Yeah, they're already expanded.
They are already there, and they are already accepting the fact that we do not live in a conventional 3D reality.
And they're curious, and they're curious, they're curious themselves. They have a curious mind.
Totally. And that is the gift of coming to any lecture of any of this like-mindedness. As I always say, come in with an open mind. Because what I'm going to share eventually will just become normal. Mm-hmm. And that is the gift of humanity, which is we are very good at being given information that we suddenly go, Holy Mother of God, and then by the next day we're going, oh yeah, right, what's for dinner? It was because we've already absorbed it, and for a lot of people, they can include it into their path of evolution of information, which I'm really happy if they do that with what I'm going to share. But it becomes very normal. Mm-hmm. It just becomes accepted. Okay, he said that. It's like when we first heard it was Holy Mother of God. Are you serious? But then it becomes very, okay, yeah, all right, I can see that. Now that the shock has worn off, yeah, okay. So I'm very happy to sort of share this information, knowing that I don't think in all the years that I've done the lectures, I've ever had one person stand up and walk out or stand up and say that's BS. They've all been very open to this information. And I think more so because it is so, in my own words, powerfully new. It is information that you possibly would never have believed possible. But when you see it in the context of what I'm going to speak about, you'll go, okay, I see that now. That makes perfect sense. It answers a lot of my questions, and I'm okay with that. And then I'm happy with that. And then you can go about your day's work, whatever it is you want to do. But you've got that little bit of information that may or may not change your perspective and philosophies and so on and so forth. So that's the sort of, I'm just sort of doing my theatrical trailer to set the precedence of where I'm going to head. So the question is, Atlantis, what happened, where is it, etc. And then at the end, we're going to talk about, obviously, what does that mean to us right now? Okay. Now, if there's any questions, by the way, Lily, please jump in and ask. Otherwise, I'll just carry on.
We've roughly got about half an hour, so I just thought I'd let you know.
No, I can do it in half an hour.
But yeah, I'm loving it because, oh my God, this is just totally my jam.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Excellent. All right, I love your jam. So we really were starting off with, and there's many documentaries out there, by the way, that talk about similar sorts of things. But one thing you'll notice in these really beautiful and powerful documentaries that are either done by the Fifth Wave, by the way, a guy called Paul Wallace, a fantastic guy, love his work. Fifth Wave, Eric von Daniken, I remember reading Eric's work back in the 1980s. Eric von Daniken, really the father of extraterrestrials, Chariots of the Gods, Gold of the Gods, History of the Gods, and so forth. Any of these documentaries you watch are phenomenal, and I love them. Now, they all talk about one thing, and that is that there was in our history a cataclysmic event that changed everything. A cataclysmic. Normally, it's in the form of a great flood. And of course, in our biblical histories, we do have through history, great floods, but in particular, they talk about roughly 11,500 to 12,000 years ago, there was a cataclysmic event that created a global flood and volcanoes and earthquakes and so forth, and it changed the very landscape of the planet. But they don't necessarily go into what was that cataclysmic event, or in particular, what was the cause of that cataclysmic event that brought about the change of the face of the planet and the direction of humanity, etc. I'm going to bring in what caused the initial change of this planet, and it is something so powerful that most people find it at times very difficult to believe, but it is based on fact, including historical documents that were written by, we've got many ancient tribes that existed 12,000 years ago, which of course included Atlantis, but you had the Aboriginal tribes and so forth. You had African tribes that existed who documented their history in either cave paintings or even on papyruses and so forth. But there are many cultures that actually documented this very event that I'm going to share with you. It's very rare information to find, by the way, on Google search. The reason behind it is because a lot of that information has been deleted. And I'm actually amazed because when I first came into connection with all of this, I tried then after, about a month or so later, trying to Google the same information. I couldn't find it. So it had already been eliminated out of the Google searches. But I managed to get...
Sounds like a lot of information right about now.
Sorry?
It sounds like a lot of information.
It does. Sorry, I sort of try and... Anyway, so what happened? Okay. Some people also talk about the arrival of Planet X on Nibiru and so forth. You may have heard that as well. The arrival of this planet or a star of some sort that was going to have an influence or will have an influence over humanity. What people don't realize is that, in fact, that particular event has already happened. But some people call it Planet X. Some people call it Nibiru. We gave it another name. We call it the moon. Mm-hmm. The moon. Now, 12,000 years ago, that moon didn't exist. Mm-hmm. It wasn't here. And ancient documentations actually share when the moon actually arrived, around about 12,000 years ago. Now, just absorb what I'm saying. 12,000 years ago, the moon arrived. It wasn't here before. Okay? Now, one of the great astrologers in history, a guy called Carl Sagan. Now, Carl Sagan was a wonder. He was an incredibly clever man. And Carl Sagan once wrote, quote, "The chances of our moon being the size that it is, so that when we have lunar and solar eclipses, it fits beautifully into the sun. The fact that it is at the exact distance from the planet Earth to where it is located, the chances of those, that the moon being the size and the weight that it is, the chances of all of those being random are zero. Zero. So that came from Carl Sagan and many others, by the way, astronomers and so forth, who have recognized that our moon is in the perfect elliptical orbit to the Earth. Perfect. And that it brings about and brought about our seasons and our tides, that it has an enormous influence on not just our planets, on this planet, but to us as well. Yeah. That we are deeply affected by the cycles of the moon. Now, even historians, astronomers who in the past, again, we all grew up that the moon was remnants of the creation of the Earth. No, it's not. That it was, in fact, a wandering satellite that was captured by the Earth's gravitational force. No, it wasn't. The moon is too big to have been captured by the Earth's gravitational force. It's not strong enough to do that. The fact that it is in the perfect orbit that it is in. In fact, we're not actually in it doesn't actually orbit the Earth. We're actually in what's called a symbiotic rotational relationship with it. We're in what's called a binary orbit. So the Earth and the moon rotate around each other. It is not that the moon rotates exclusively around the Earth. There is this beautiful binary relationship between the two. Okay. Why is our moon the only moon in the solar system with a moon that we only see one side of its face? The moon does actually rotate, but because we also rotate with it, we only ever see one side of the moon.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have a dark side and we have a light side, but we don't see the dark side. And it's the only satellite connected to any planet in our solar system that does that. It is also the largest of all the moons as well, which is quite amazing considering the size of our planet. Okay? So what would happen? What happens if a object the size of our moon suddenly appears in the location that it is, where it is right now? Well, indeed, it did have major catastrophic implications to this planet. Now, you know that we have, and I will jump backwards and forwards here, so bear with me. You know that we have true north and magnetic north.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea why we have true north?
Well, I'm hoping we have it now.
I'll tell you about that as well, yes. We do have true north and we have magnetic north. But why do we still have true north? Because we still have true north because that was the positioning of the planet before the moon arrived. Yeah. So our north and south poles went straight up and straight down. By the way, we're actually going through an event right now called polar shift, and that's another subject as well. So our magnetic north and south are no longer where they used to be. Okay, and that's all part of what the emerging energies are that we're moving into.
Yeah, the new energy that's coming forward.
That's correct. So what happened? The moon arrived into Earth orbit. It shifted the Earth on its axis by 24.4 degrees over, which is where we currently lie. So we went from a straight up, north-south, to an axis of 24.4 degrees because of the gravitational effect of the moon arriving. That then caused another effect. And now I'm going to jump into a geologist called Charles Hapgood, who in the 1950s came out with a philosophy of what's called crust displacement. He was an amateur geologist. He came out publicly and stated that the Earth's crust actually can slide on the mantle. It shifts backwards and forwards, it moves. Now, back in those days, in the early 50s, he was poo-pooed by the academics of the time who said that's ridiculous, it's nonsensical, you're completely off. There was one person, though, who completely supported his philosophy, his scientific research. And actually, when in 1958, Charles Hapgood wrote and released his first book called The Shifting Crust, this one person wrote the foreword in that book, and that person was Albert Einstein. So Einstein realized that Charles Hapgood was absolutely correct. Now, today, Charles Hapgood's work is absolutely categorically proven correct. We do have what's called crust displacement. That's how all our continents shift and move on the mantle. Back in the early 50s, he was poo-pooed. By 1958 and today, crust displacement, 100% categorically proven correct. Right, we go back now to the arrival of the moon. The moon caused the axis of the Earth to switch to 24.4 degrees off axis. It then caused an enormous gravitational effect on the Earth's crust. It created and caused crust displacement. The entire crust shifted some 3,000 kilometers south from where everything is now. Now, I'm going to quickly jump into a very amazing movie that came out in 2012 called, funnily enough, 2012, which was an epic action movie when the Earth goes through a phenomenal change geographically, geologically. I don't know if you've seen it, 2012. If you haven't, watch it. It is very, very powerful. In that, good, I can see you writing it down. Yeah,
I'm writing it down.
It's a phenomenal. Now, there is a scene in it. There's a scene where our heroes are flying to China, and there's a reason they're going to China. And they have to refuel in Hawaii, but Hawaii has been obliterated by volcanoes, and they can no longer fuel up in their aircraft. So they're going to plunge into the ocean. And just prior to them actually having to land in the ocean because they're running out of fuel, suddenly China's there. There's China, the continent of China, when it shouldn't have been there. And they're all going, WTF, how can that be? And then somebody says that the crust and all the continents has shifted, and now there's China. Our hero turns around and says something that most people would never have picked up. He says, "Thank you, Charles Hapgood." Now, two things in that movie. One, Charles Hapgood, the acknowledgement of Charles Hapgood and the crust displacement. The other thing is they're saying that the Earth's continents have moved about 3,000 kilometers, which is exactly, in our history that we're talking about, was the same shifting location or kilometers that the crust did actually shift 12,000 years ago, about 3,000 kilometers. So everything moves south. So if you can imagine, the continent of Atlantis existed 12,000 years ago in a specific location. It existed in that specific location harmonically, and this is where we get into Tesla work, because the technology of Atlantis was crystal-based, harmonic crystal generated energy that was in tune to the harmonic frequency of the planet. There are certain hub locations around this planet where those energies are the most powerful. And the location that Atlantis was chosen, the continent, was because the Earth energy in that location was probably the most powerful. So they set up the harmonic generators, these vast crystals that would harmonically draw in the energy of the planet and transfer it all around the planet. Tesla was able to do that as well. He called it free flow energy, and he successfully did that. People who know Tesla know that's exactly what he created. Free flow energy, which was all based on Atlantean technology and understandings of the Atlantean harmonic technologies. So the crust shifted. The continent of Atlantis shifted to its current location. Now, Plato said it went under the ocean because of the Great Flood. No, it didn't. It actually was immersed in water, but not quite the way that we all believe. The water was ice. Where does Atlantis continent exist now? Antarctica. So let that just sink in. So moon arrives 12,000 years ago. The Earth's axis, because of its arrival, shifts 24.4 degrees. The tectonic stresses due to the arrival of the moon creates crust displacement. Everything shifted approximately 3,000 kilometers south of where everything was. The continent of Atlantis shifted to its current location and froze because it moved into a cold climate. The culture, or I call the physical side of Atlantis, being the city of Atlantis, froze over in the ice. And that's where it remained until it was rediscovered by the Americans some decades ago. Why, therefore, is Antarctica surrounded by scientific establishments? By the way, they're not scientific. That was a cover-up. Yeah. They're embassies. They are embassies that most countries that are able to have their location, they're actual embassies. And that in itself, again, is another lecture. How is that possible? What's going on in Antarctica now? What is happening, that we actually have embassies in Antarctica, and that's another subject. Again, I'm just trying to make this as rudimentary as possible. I know it's a lot to absorb. Now, this is where it gets very powerful, very powerful. Now, I meet people who live in this region, this particular region of Christchurch, North Canterbury in particular, that have come from all over the world. Mm-hmm. And over the last few years, including myself, by the way, are now living in this region. Mm-hmm. They've all come for specific reasons. They liked the region, they love New Zealand, work, and all of those things. But there are so many people that I have connected to that have come from all over the world and have found themselves here. Now, I'm going to tell you, so this is where things get very powerful, very powerful. I said to you that the Atlantean culture, or it's the continent of Atlantis, was built in its location because of the harmonic energies that existed there were the most powerful. The energies themselves didn't shift. The continent shifted, but those energy systems remained in the same location because they ultimately are powered by the Earth's magnetic field. Mm-hmm. Okay, as an initial source, but of course it extends beyond that as well. And there are what we call the universal energies as well that are all symbiotically connected to one another. But ultimately, it is powered by the Earth's magnetic fields. So the continent of Atlantis shifted to its location, but another landmass took up its location instead, and that is New Zealand. So New Zealand has taken up the original harmonic location that Atlantis once occupied. That is why New Zealand is so important. Now, for those of you who don't know, America has Project Deep Freeze here in Christchurch. You will probably drive past it if you're on Orchard Road. It is connected to the international airport, or the Christchurch airport. And it is a large hangar, an establishment that the US flies between New Zealand and Antarctica, and has done so since the 1960s. There's a reason behind why Christchurch was chosen as being, or Christchurch, New Zealand was chosen by the Americans to be the place that they go to and from Antarctica. They could have made it Hobart in Tasmania. That's equally as easily accessible, but they chose this location. Why? Because the harmonic energies that once existed in Atlantis exist here now. Mm. That is why people from all over the world are traveling to New Zealand, to this location. It is, as I say, that the original souls of Atlantis are returning to the place where it all began, here. Now, a lot of the Atlantis technology that the Americans have brought back out of Antarctica are stored in Christchurch, and they're stored in that hangar. The reason being is because they all operate, these pieces of equipment operate harmonically and need to be immersed in that harmonic energy to operate, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. However, there is something else, and this is where we were just talking about before. An event is happening right now that is changing everything, and that is polar shift. Now, scientifically, yes, polar shift exists. It is a scientific fact. Our Earth's magnetic fields and our polarities switch. It is not a myth. It is actual science. So our magnetic fields and our poles reverse, okay, regularly. Every, say, 150 to 250 to 500,000 years, the poles reverse. Now, when the moon arrived, it did create polar shift. On top of everything else that happened in that cataclysmic event, it caused a polar reversal. So our poles flipped. That means that the energies and the harmonic energies that Atlantis existed within were gone because the energy flow and the harmonics had changed.
But now they're shifting.
Now we are going through a polar shift, and we are now reverting back to those harmonic frequencies and energies that existed at the time of Atlantis. Now, we are experiencing that more and more as every day goes by. Now, normally scientists will tell you that a polar shift can take approximately 1,000 years to happen. Okay, 1,000 years. No, this is happening within years. So within the last 120 years, our pole, our North Pole, is now some 3,000 kilometers away from where magnetic north used to be. It is flipping over. And by the way, this information is available on Google. Okay, there is a department, there is the geotech or the geo website, the USGS, has a part of their establishment, they have the magnetic office, or that their job is to observe and to report magnetic fluctuations in our magnetic field, which then information is sent to the airlines, the shipping companies, so that they are aware that they have to adjust their GPSs because of the changes. In 2016, a report went out from GEO that the magnetic field was fluctuating and changing so fast that they couldn't keep up with the changes. It's happening faster and faster every day. So you can, in fact, and I do show a slide in my lectures of where the Earth's magnetic north is now. So as we are moving into these new energies, as every day goes by, we're starting to feel the effects of that actually occurring. And as every day and year goes by, it's happening faster and faster and faster and faster. So we're looking at the next year to 2 years before there's a complete polar reversal.
Which is also what people are talking about spiritually, our ascension.
Now, well done. You've hit the nail on the head. Not a lot of people, Lily, pick up on the connection between polar reversal and ascension. You're probably one of the first people who have. Because, yes, you're correct. People who do personal development or light work or new age work all talk about this thing called ascension. And people talk about the change of humanity, ascension, blah, blah, blah. But I often then will ask the question to that person, yes, you're right, but do you understand where the ascension comes from? What is it all about? And they say, well, it means that we're going to, yes, they say, it's an increase on our vibratory level. Yes, I say, perfect. But what's going to create that increase in vibratory level that then follows and manifests into an ascension? That's where most people get stuck. They don't understand. They are aware of the effect, but not the cause and effect. The cause, absolutely, as you just said, is based upon the reversal of our magnetic field. But by the way, not going back to, this is actually an energy that has never been experienced on planet Earth, ever. So yes, you have polar shifts and it reverts, but this is a vibration that has never been experienced on this planet. And again, there are reasons beyond this planet why that is so, and at this particular time. So yes, polar shift, magnetic reversal is part of our ascension process. But even then, there is work to be done.
Oh, totally.
And that's when we get into the whole field of personal development, changing our vibratory levels by doing the work on ourselves. And that, in essence, is the conclusion to this, which is the Atlantis rising, is doing the work upon ourselves so that we are at a vibration level that we can experience this ascension. But that means doing the work on ourselves. And yes, personal development organizations such as the one that my parents taught was a step in that powerful right direction in being able to identify the energy blocks that we have within ourselves and being able to release those so that we can start to attune ourselves to those higher frequencies. That, in essence, is the rising part of Atlantis rising.
And I love, oh my God, I just love all of that because it makes, complete and utter sense to me on such a level. My work is very much about showing people what their blocks are energetically. And, quite often people don't actually want to hear it or see it or feel it or witness it.
Yeah.
But, we're being put on fast forward now.
Yes, that's a very good way of saying it.
Fast forward. But, we can't, for so long we've pushed play, fast forward, rewind, relive the experience, play, Now it's like we're fast forward. We don't have time to rewind and have another crack.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I mean, when I do bring in this information, as you can appreciate now, maybe many of your listeners are saying, okay, what's the moon all about now?
You know, but
because it's now saying,
it'll make sense to them. It'll make complete sense to them.
Because it does beg the question, okay, you just spoke about the moon arriving. Then what the hell is the moon all about? That in itself is another lecture. What is the moon? Who brought it here? What is its significance? What is its purpose? What's within it? Now, interestingly enough, last year, a big blockbuster movie called Moonfall was released. Now, I did see it, and to be honest, I thought it was a bit, I do love my science fiction. And I looked upon it, I thought, it was a bit iffy as a movie, but the essence of what it was all about was fascinating because it talks about the moon was in fact a giant spacecraft. Now, that's the first time that a movie has actually been released in relation to the moon, and that it was saying the moon was in fact a spacecraft. And in this movie, the heroes actually go inside the moon and discover that it's an entire world that has always been there. But what is it now? A platform. It's a research platform. It is a platform for many races that have been there observing. But who brought it here originally? What was it designed to do? And how did that play into the Atlantean culture? Well, there's one word, Anunnaki, the Shining Ones, who are laced within our histories, throughout the Old Testaments, throughout the New Testaments, throughout the Celtic histories, through the biblical histories. These beings of light, who are all known as different names, are coming forth. It is the return that is evident in myth and legend, the return of the Shining Ones at this particular time. The beings of light that are taking on the energies of dark to bring humanity out of that age of darkness into what is known as the Golden Age. The beings of light, the Golden Ones, the Shining Ones, Anunnaki.
Which
now,
in our terminology, the star seeds.
Yes, yeah.
In the New Age spirituality, the star seeds, yeah. Oh my God, we're going to have to come to an end. I have absolutely...
Fine.
I could talk to you for hours. Absolutely.
We'll meet up for coffee and we can carry on talking.
We will. So, David, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
How do people find your work? Come to your lectures, because I feel like there'll be many beautiful listeners that will be intrigued and fascinated and wanting to learn more. So how do we find you?
First and foremost, they can connect with me through Facebook by typing in Atlantis Rising New Zealand. That will bring my Facebook page straight up. They will see on there also that there are workshops that we're going to be running, which is called the Crystal Atlantis Workshop, which is a dear friend of mine who specializes in crystals. And of course, crystals and Atlantis go hand in glove. So we're going to be discussing the connection with all crystals and Atlantis, and that'll be coming up shortly. Lectures, they can find all the information on up-and-coming lectures that are going to be either in North Canterbury or in the city. There's a space there that a friend of mine has a beautiful centre that I run the lectures out of there. So that's where, first and foremost, Atlantis Rising NZ. They can even look at the artwork under David Arkenstone Barnett Art and Photography, see all the artwork, including Atlantis artwork that I've done. And they can connect with me, email atlantisrisingnz@gmail.com, or through Messenger, through Atlantis Rising Facebook page. I'm always happy, wonderfully happy to connect with people who want to either find out details of the next lectures, workshops, or just have a conversation and share their experiences of who they feel they are and what their connection to Atlantis is.
Oh, love it. And we'll put the links in the show notes.
Thank you.
All of that. Thank you so much, David.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity for me to share my story.